All right, man. Let's move on to the next player. I don't. For some reason, Evan Ingram's near and dear to my heart. I drafted him last year.
I don't know why. You love this guy.
I love Evan Ingram. So here's sort of my when I look at Evan Ingram, this is what I see. I see someone who could be, and I'm serious about this, in the top 3 or 2 of tight ends in this league, just from an athletic perspective. I think the environment is getting better in New York. It wasn't amazing last year, but I think Daniel Jones will be good this year, and I like Saquon. I like the weapons around Evan Ingram. But again, going back to injury, what's the deal with Evan Ingram from a tight end perspective?
So the thing with Evan Engram is he just can't. He's one of those guys that he can't seem to stay on the field, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking through. I had this this conversation with Pat Thorman, I was like, oh, holy cow, Pat Thorman responded to me. So that was cool. But we were having a little conversation on Twitter about Evan Engram, and I basically said, there's a 2018 study which is pretty recent. And what that study found, and I need to get a hold of the full text because I just had the abstract. I looked everywhere, couldn't find the full text. But essentially, this study on NFL players found that after a Lisfranc surgery or injury or whatever, the offensive players performed worse than defensive players when they came back, compared, relatively speaking, because there was a study like a few years ago saying there was no difference. Well, this new study dug a little deeper and said, okay, but was there? They separated offense versus defense. Lisfranc injuries affect offensive players more than defensive players, and it was clinically or statistically significant. Then they also looked at the amount of missed games over the following 2 and the second season, so the season after the injury, and then the second season after the injury. And those players missed more time, significant time, compared to the players who didn't have the same position players who didn't have Lisfranc injury. So these players, and like I said, I need to get the full text article, but they're missing more games. Is that because of foot and ankle? Is that by chance? Like, what were the methods there? I need to look into that. But at the very least, to me, clinically, this is where the clinical part comes in. It does make sense to me. If you have this major reconstruction to a foot, you're already a big dude. These injuries tend to hurt big dudes because they just land, sort of down on their foot this way, and there's so much leverage, right? So that lever arm's so long that their bones can't really withstand that, so they'll have whatever damage to the middle of the foot. That's what Lisfranc injuries are. On top of that, he's had multiple MCL injuries, right? And so those MCL injuries, they have about a 10% recurrence rate, depending on where you look. And it's not so much that the MCL injuries are like nagging or anything like that. But it's just you sort of every time you strain or sprain a ligament, you're just stretching it out and stretching it out and stretching it out. Eventually, it does hit a point where it's just not going to come back to where it was before. And I'm afraid we're getting to that point already with Ingram. And then obviously he's had concussions. So the more concussions you have, the worse off you are. Yeah. And that's not a place that I necessarily want to be. Yeah. But the flip side is similar to Dalvin Cook, like we were saying, is the dude's so good when he's on the field. He's an athletic freak.
Exactly.
And he's like 24 years old or something, like 25 years old.
He's not young.
And so it's like,
at all, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like when he's like one of those dudes that's if he's active, you're like, fuck, how do I, I'm not going to start Rhett Ellison, right?
Me.
Or what's his name? The guy for the Bears, Jesper Horsted. I'm not going to start Jesper Horsted over Evan Engram.
Dude, so, you look at your backups, you're like, I can't start any of these guys.
Exactly.
Especially bad with tight ends too, because
there's nobody else out there.
It's such a barren wasteland of a position as it is.
So when you have Evan Engram ready to go, and it's like back to it's almost like the AJ Green question, or the someone with a hamstring, ACL, they look kind of good. You're like, fuck it, I'll risk it.
Right, exactly.
I guess I'll play.
So just a little
else out there.
So a little snippet here. This was from the article I did with Player Profiler. I have the amount. So let's see. So Ingram has already missed 14 games. He's missed almost an entire season since he came into the league.
Crazy.
And which is nuts, right? You wouldn't think. It's like, holy cow.
Mm-hmm.
And Greg Olsen, who was sort of like a comparable player when he came into the league, because he was really banged up too. I think in that same 3-year slot, Greg Olsen actually only missed 2 games or something, and Evan Ingram's already missed 14 games.
That's crazy.
So it also goes back to what we were saying with Will Fuller when we were having that conversation about injury prone versus not injury prone. The null hypothesis is Will Fuller can stay healthy. The null hypothesis is Evan Engram can stay healthy during a season. And I can't confidently say to people who ask me, like, do you think that he's going to stay healthy? I'm not going to say yes because I haven't seen it yet. Like, from a scientific perspective, if you're viewing it like that on a case-by-case basis, I can't confidently say, oh, yeah, Evan Engram should stay healthy because he just hasn't shown that he can.